I spent 6 months on the North Atlantic oil rigs. 6 months of 12-hour shifts, brutal winds, and the constant drone of machinery that became a second heartbeat. The pay was exceptional, enough to secure my daughter's future. But the cost was measured in missed bedtimes, unanswered video calls, and the growing distance in Emma's eyes every time we spoke through a screen. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm an offshore drilling engineer. At 40 years old, I'd become the kind of father I swore I'd never be present in bank accounts, but absent where it mattered. My ex-wife Sarah and I had divorced 3 years ago. The split was amicable enough, all things considered. We'd agreed on joint custody, alternating months when I was onshore. Emma, my 8-year-old daughter, was the center of my universe, even if that universe had lately shrunk to a 2-by-3-meter cabin 500 kilometers from land. December on the rig was particularly harsh. The North Sea doesn't care about holidays or father-daughter promises. I'd been counting down the days until my rotation ended on December 23rd, imagining Emma's face when I'd walk through the door on Christmas Eve. We had traditions building gingerbread houses that inevitably collapsed, watching How the Grinch Stole Christmas while drinking hot chocolate, her falling asleep against my shoulder before midnight mass. But something felt wrong. For 2 weeks, Emma hadn't answered my video calls. Sarah's explanations shifted like sand. First, Emma was busy with school projects. Then she was staying late for drama club rehearsals. Finally, on December 10th, Sarah told me Emma had been accepted into an exclusive winter wilderness camp in Muskoka, the kind of program where they confiscate electronics to promote mindfulness and outdoor skills. She was so excited, Marcus, Sarah had said through the grainy satellite connection. You know how she's been struggling socially. This will be good for her. I wanted to believe it. Emma had always been shy, preferring books to playgrounds, solitude to crowds. A camp might help her confidence. But there was something in Sarah's voice, a tightness, a rehearsed quality that made my stomach twist. On December 16th, I received word that a critical valve system had failed on the rig. Non-essential personnel were being evacuated while repairs were conducted. I wasn't non-essential, but I pulled every favor I had. By December 17th, I was on a helicopter heading back to Aberdeen, and by the 18th, I'd landed in Toronto. I didn't tell Sarah I was coming home early. Call it instinct. Call it paranoia. But that twist in my stomach had become a constant presence, and I'd learned over 40 years to trust my gut. Our house, well, Sarah's house now, was in North York, a modest, semi-detached we'd bought when Emma was 2. I'd moved to a condo downtown after the divorce, close enough to be involved but far enough to give everyone space. I drove there first on the evening of the 18th, hoping to surprise Emma if she was back from camp. The house was dark. Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway, and neither was the silver Audi that belonged to Richard Hayes, her boyfriend of 8 months. I'd met Richard twice. He was an investment banker, impeccably dressed, with the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. Emma had been quiet around him, withdrawn in a way that concerned me, but Sarah insisted it was just adjustment. She needs time to accept that we've both moved on, Sarah had said. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, watching the house, feeling increasingly foolish. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Emma really was at camp, learning to build fires and identify constellations. Maybe I was just a father struggling with the reality that his daughter's life continued without him. But then I remembered Emma's last text message to me, sent 3 weeks ago before her phone apparently went silent. Just 3 words. Dad, help me. When I'd asked Sarah about it, she'd laughed it off. She probably sent it by accident. You know how kids are with phones. I got out of the truck and walked to the front door. I still had a key. Sarah had never asked for it back. The house was cold inside. The thermostat turned low. Mail was piled on the entry table, mostly flyers and bills. In the kitchen, the sink was empty, the counters clean. Everything looked normal except for one detail. Emma's backpack, the purple one with rainbow patches she'd decorated herself, was hanging on the hook by the door. If she was at camp, why was her backpack here? I climbed the stairs to her bedroom. The door was open, and my chest tightened. Her bed was made, her stuffed animals arranged neatly on the pillow. But her bookshelf looked wrong gaps where her favorite books should be. The Harry Potter series she'd read 4 times. The Roald Dahl collection I'd given her for her 7th birthday. I opened her closet. Her winter coat was missing, along with several pairs of warm clothing. That made sense if she was at camp. But then I saw it. Crumpled in the corner of the closet floor, her diary. the blue leather-bound journal I'd given her last Christmas. Emma never went anywhere without that diary. I picked it up with trembling hands and opened to the last entry, dated December 1st. Richard locked me in the basement storage again today. Mom doesn't know. He says if I tell her, he'll make sure I never see Dad again. It's so cold down there. My chest hurts when I breathe. I tried to be quiet, but I was crying, and he said crying is for babies. Mr. Whiskers is down there too. I think he's sick. Richard says animals that make noise deserve to be punished. My vision blurred. Mr. Whiskers was Emma's hamster, a golden Syrian she'd named after a character in her favorite book. I'd bought him for her 6th birthday, and she'd cared for him with the kind of devotion only a child can muster. I read the previous entries, each one a knife to my heart. Weeks of abuse documented in Emma's careful, round handwriting. Richard yelling at her for minor infractions. Richard taking away her dinner when she spoke back. Richard telling her she was a burden, an inconvenience, a mistake her mother regretted. And the basement storage room, again and again, punishment for being difficult. The last line of the final entry shattered me. I wish Dad would come home. I wish Dad would save me. I called Sarah's number. It rang once before going to voicemail. I called again. Same result. I tried. Richard's number blocked. I stood in Emma's bedroom, my daughter's diary clutched in my hands, and made a decision. If Emma was at camp, I'd find her there. If she wasn't, if my worst fears were true, I'd tear the city apart until I found her. I started with the camp. Sarah had mentioned Muskoka, but she hadn't given me a name. I spent 2 hours that night searching every wilderness camp, outdoor education center, and winter program within a 200-kilometer radius. I called 17 facilities. None of them had an Emma Chen registered. By midnight, I was back in my truck, driving through North York, looking for Sarah's car. I checked her favorite grocery store, the yoga studio she attended, the wine bar where she and Richard went on Friday nights. Nothing. At 2 a.m, exhausted and desperate, I remembered something. Richard lived in a luxury building in Yorkville, one of those glass towers with concierge service and underground parking. Sarah had mentioned it once, complaining about how small his condo was despite the astronomical rent. I drove downtown, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. The building was easy to find, all gleaming windows and modern architecture. I parked across the street and stared up at it, wondering which window was Richard's, wondering if my daughter was behind one of those panes of glass. I couldn't just walk into the building. I had no proof, no authority, just a father's terrible certainty that something was very, very wrong. I needed to be smart about this. If I was wrong, I'd look like a crazy ex-husband. If I was right and I made a mistake, I might never see Emma again. I waited until dawn, watching the building. At 7, residents started emerging for their morning routines, joggers, dog walkers, men in suits carrying briefcases. At 8, I saw her. Sarah, wearing the black coat I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago, stepping out of the building's entrance. She looked smaller somehow, her shoulders hunched, her face pale. She walked to the corner and hailed a cab, and I made a split-second decision. I got out of my truck and walked straight to the building's entrance. The doorman, a young guy who looked fresh out of university, smiled professionally. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Richard Hayes," I said, trying to sound casual. "Unit 2407. Is Mr. Hayes expecting you?" "He is. We have a meeting about a business investment opportunity." The doorman glanced at his computer screen, then back at me. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see your name on the visitor list. That's odd. Richard and I confirmed yesterday. Marcus Chen, perhaps he spelled it wrong?" The doorman checked again, frowning. "I'm not showing anything. Would you like me to call up to his unit?" "Please do." He picked up the phone and dialed. It rang for a long time, too long. Finally, he hung up. No answer. I'm afraid Mr. Hayes might have stepped out. That's strange. He knew I was coming. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check messages. "Look, I've driven all the way from Mississauga. Is there any way I could wait in the lobby? I'm sure he'll be right back." The doorman hesitated. "I suppose that would be all right. There are chairs by the elevator. Actually, I should probably run up and leave a note on his door, save him the trouble of wondering why I left. Sir, I can't let you go up without authorization." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Between you and me, this deal is worth about 200,000. If it falls through because of a miscommunication, Richard's going to be very upset. I'm sure you don't want to be the reason a resident loses that kind of money. The doorman's eyes widened. He glanced around the empty lobby, then sighed. 5 minutes, sir. Leave your note and come straight back down. Absolutely. Thank you. I took the elevator to the 24th floor, my heart hammering. The hallway was silent, carpeted in expensive gray broadloom. Unit 2407 was at the end of the hall. I approached the door and knocked, knowing Richard wouldn't answer. I'd seen Sarah leave, and I doubted he was home if she wasn't. No response. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. I pulled out the small toolkit I kept in my truck. I'd grabbed it before entering the building, just in case. The lock was standard residential, nothing particularly secure. I'd learned basic lockpicking during a safety training course years ago. It took me 3 minutes to get the door open. Richard's condo was exactly what I'd expected: minimalist furniture, modern art on the walls, a view of the city that probably cost him $4,000 a month. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and something else, something sour that made my skin crawl. "Emma?" I called out softly. "Emma, it's Dad. Are you here?" Silence. I moved through the condo quickly. Living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, all empty. But there was a door at the end of a short hallway, and it had a deadbolt on the outside. My blood turned to ice. I slid the deadbolt open and pulled the door. It led to a stairwell, one of those service staircases buildings use for maintenance access. A sign on the wall read, "Basement storage. Authorized personnel only." I descended the stairs 2 at a time. The temperature dropped with every step, and by the time I reached the basement level, I could see my breath. The stairwell opened into a long, concrete corridor lined with storage cages, chain-link enclosures where residents kept their extra belongings. "Emma!" My voice echoed off the concrete walls. "Emma, answer me." I heard it then, a faint sound, barely audible. A whimper. I ran down the corridor, checking each storage unit. Most were filled with boxes, old furniture, skiing equipment. Then I saw it, at the very end. A storage unit with a padlock on the door, and taped to the chain link was a piece of paper with the word "broken" written in black marker. The whimper came again, from inside the unit. "Emma?" I pressed my face against the chain link. "Baby, is that you?" "Daddy." The voice was so small, so broken. "Daddy, is that really you?" I saw her then, huddled in the corner of the unit, wrapped in what looked like a thin blanket. Her face was pale, her lips almost blue, and when she moved toward the gate, I saw her stumble. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm getting you out right now." The padlock was heavy duty, but I had bolt cutters in my truck. I couldn't leave her, not even for the 2 minutes it would take to retrieve them. Instead, I grabbed the chain link and pulled with everything I had. The gate wasn't designed to withstand that kind of force from the inside. These storage units were meant to keep things in, not keep people out. The metal frame twisted, and I managed to create a gap wide enough to reach through. Emma crawled toward me, and when I pulled her through the gap, I felt how cold she was. Her whole body was shaking. "I've got you," I whispered, wrapping her in my coat. "I've got you, baby. You're safe now." "Mr. Whiskers," she said, her teeth chattering. "Daddy, Mr. Whiskers is in the corner. He's not moving anymore." I looked back into the storage unit and saw the small cage in the corner and the still form of Emma's hamster inside it. Rage, pure and primal, surged through me. "How long have you been down here?" I asked gently. "I don't know. Richard brought me here on Sunday night. Mom went to visit her sister in Montreal. He said I was being difficult because I wouldn't eat the dinner he made. He said difficult kids need to learn. 4 days. She'd been locked in a freezing basement storage unit for 4 days. I lifted her in my arms. She weighed almost nothing and carried her back up the stairs. When we emerged into Richard's condo, I set her down gently on the couch and cranked the thermostat as high as it would go. "Are you hurt anywhere?" I examined her hands, her face, looking for signs of injury. "My chest hurts," she whispered. "It's hard to breathe sometimes." Emma had asthma, mild but manageable with her inhaler. The cold air, the stress, this could trigger a serious attack. "Where's your inhaler?" Richard took it. He said I was being dramatic. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" "My daughter's been locked in a freezing basement for 4 days. She has asthma and she's having trouble breathing. We need an ambulance at 185 Cumberland Street, Unit 2407. Sir, is she conscious? Yes, but her lips are blue and she's shaking. Please hurry. Ambulance is on the way. Stay with her and keep her warm. I wrapped Emma in every blanket I could find in Richard's condo. She was crying now. Soft, gasping sobs that broke my heart. Daddy, I tried to call you. Richard said you didn't care. He said you stayed away because you didn't want me anymore. That's not true. I held her face in my hands, making sure she could see my eyes. That is not true, Emma. I love you more than anything in this world. I came back as soon as I could. I came looking for you. He said if I told Mom, he'd make sure I never saw you again. He said Mom would believe him, not me. The door to the condo burst open. Richard stood there, holding shopping bags from an expensive grocery store, his face shifting from surprise to anger in seconds. What the hell are you doing in my home? I stood up, placing myself between him and Emma. I'm taking my daughter to the hospital. You're going to wait here for the police. The police? You broke into my condo. I'm calling security. You locked an 8-year-old child in a freezing storage unit for 4 days. You killed her pet. You abused and terrorized her. So, yes, please call security. Call the police while you're at it. I have her diary documenting weeks of abuse, and I'm sure the security cameras in this building caught you taking her down to the basement. Richard's face went white. He set down the groceries slowly. You don't understand. She's difficult. She needs discipline. Sarah can't control her, and someone has to. You locked her in a freezer. It's not a freezer. It's a storage. With no heat, no toilet, no food or water for 4 days. A storage unit you padlocked shut. Richard's hands clenched into fists. Sarah will tell them. She'll explain. Emma's been lying, making up stories to get attention. Sarah knows. Does she? I pulled out my phone and held up the screen, showing the photos I'd taken of the storage unit, the padlock, the cage with the dead hamster. Does Sarah know you've been doing this? Or did you tell her Emma was sleeping over at a friend's house? The color drained from Richard's face completely. The ambulance arrived within 7 minutes. The paramedics assessed Emma quickly, noting her low body temperature, her labored breathing, the dehydration. They started an IV and administered an emergency asthma treatment before loading her onto a stretcher. We're taking her to Sick Kids, one paramedic told me. You can ride with us. I'm her father. I'm not leaving her side. The police arrived as we were leaving. I gave them a brief statement, showed them the storage unit, Emma's diary, my phone full of photos. Richard stood silent, his lawyer brain probably already calculating his defense. By the time we reached the hospital, Sarah had somehow found out. She burst into the emergency room, her eyes wild, and ran straight to Emma's bed. Baby, oh my God, baby. Emma flinched away from her. Sarah's face crumpled. Emma, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. He told me you were at your friend Olivia's house. He said you'd asked to stay there for a few days. You believed him, I said quietly. You believed him instead of checking. He showed me text messages from Olivia's mother. Sarah's voice broke. How was I supposed to know they were fake? You could have called me. You could have let me talk to Emma. He said it would upset her. He said she needed space from you, that you were part of the problem. And you believed that too. A doctor approached, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Chen, I'm Dr. Patricia Wilson. We've stabilized Emma's breathing, but I need to ask you some questions about her medical history. I spent the next hour answering questions, signing forms, watching Emma sleep under heated blankets with an oxygen mask on her face. Sarah sat in the corner, crying silently. I felt no sympathy for her. Emma was admitted for observation. The doctors wanted to monitor her lung function, make sure her core temperature normalized, and assess her psychological state. A social worker came to interview both of us separately. I told her everything. I showed her Emma's diary, my phone records showing 2 weeks of unanswered calls, the timeline of events. The social worker's expression grew grimmer with each detail. Mr. Chen, I need to inform you that we're mandated to report this to Child Protective Services. There will be an investigation, and Emma will not be returned to her mother's custody until that investigation is complete. Good, I said. The social worker glanced at Sarah through the window of the family room, then back at me. We'll need to determine whether Miss Chen was aware of the abuse or complicit in it. The fact that she left Emma in Mr. Hayes's care for multiple days, despite having limited contact with her daughter, will be a factor. Over the next 3 days, the investigation unfolded. Security footage from Richard's building showed him carrying Emma, unconscious, down to the basement storage on the evening of December 14th. More footage showed him visiting the storage unit only once in 4 days, on December 16th, to leave a bottle of water and a granola bar. Forensic analysis of Richard's phone revealed deleted text messages to Sarah. Fabricated communications, he claimed, were from Olivia's mother. Sarah insisted she'd believe them, that Richard had been convincing, that she'd had no reason to doubt him. But the investigators found something else. A previous complaint from Richard's ex-wife, filed and later withdrawn, alleging that Richard had been inappropriately harsh with her son from a previous marriage. The ex-wife, when contacted, broke down and admitted Richard had isolated and punished her son regularly, keeping him in a locked bathroom for hours as discipline. She'd withdrawn the complaint when Richard threatened to bankrupt her in court. Richard Hayes was charged with child endangerment, unlawful confinement, child abuse, and animal cruelty. The Crown prosecutor, after reviewing the evidence, decided not to offer a plea deal. Richard's lawyer argued that he'd been trying to help Sarah discipline a difficult child, that his methods were unorthodox but not criminal. The jury disagreed. In March, Richard was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Sarah was charged as an accessory after the fact. The evidence suggested she hadn't known about the storage unit specifically, but she'd been aware Richard was using harsh disciplinary methods and had chosen to look the other way. She'd also failed to check on Emma's whereabouts adequately, accepting Richard's explanations without verification despite Emma's clear distress in the weeks leading up to the incident. Sarah pleaded guilty. She received 1 year in jail and 3 years of probation. She also lost custody of Emma permanently, retaining only supervised visitation rights once per month. I quit the oil rigs. The money wasn't worth it anymore. I took a consulting position with an engineering firm in Toronto, work that kept me in the city and available for Emma every single day. We moved into a house in Riverdale, close to her school, with a big backyard where we could plant a garden come spring. Emma's recovery was slow. The physical effects, mild frostbite on her toes, respiratory issues from the cold exposure healed within weeks. The psychological scars took longer. She had nightmares about being locked in dark places. She flinched when doors closed. She stopped eating for a while, terrified that showing hunger made her weak or difficult. We started therapy, both of us. A child psychologist named Dr. Aisha Patel worked with Emma twice a week, using play therapy and cognitive behavioral techniques to help her process the trauma. I learned about hypervigilance, about how abuse rewires a child's brain, about the patience and consistency required to rebuild trust. By spring, Emma was smiling again. Small smiles at first, tentative and quickly hidden, but gradually, as she realized she was truly safe, the smiles grew. She started reading again, losing herself in stories of magic and adventure. We got a new hamster, a sweet-tempered female she named Luna, and she cared for her with the same devotion she'd shown Mr. Whiskers. One evening in May, as we sat on the back porch watching fireflies, Emma leaned against my shoulder. "Dad?" "Yeah, sweetie? Thank you for coming back early." I wrapped my arm around her. "I'll always come back for you, Emma. Always." "I know," she whispered. "I know that now. I think about that December day often. The moment I found Emma's diary, the terror of not knowing where she was, the 4 days she spent alone in the cold and dark, believing no one was coming to save her. Sometimes I wake up at night, heart pounding, imagining what might have happened if the rig hadn't been evacuated early, if I'd come home on December 23rd as planned, if I'd believed Sarah's explanations about the camp. Emma would have spent 9 days in that storage unit, maybe longer. Maybe she wouldn't have survived. But I did come home early. I did trust my instincts. And Emma did survive. The experience taught me something I should have known all along. Presence matters more than money. Gut feelings deserve investigation. And hidden abuse is still abuse sometimes, especially because it's hidden. Abusers depend on silence, on victims being too afraid to speak, on others being too trusting or too busy to notice. I learned that one parent's vigilance can make all the difference. That documenting concerns, even if they seem paranoid, can save a life. That love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day to show up, pay attention, and fight for the people who matter most. Emma's 8 now, almost 9. She's thriving in school, making friends, learning to trust again. She still has hard days, moments when the trauma resurfaces. But she also has good days, more and more of them, where she's just a kid being a kid. And I'm there for all of it, the good days and the hard ones, the nightmares and the laughter, the small victories and the setbacks. Because that's what fathers do. We show up, we pay attention, we believe our children when they tell us something's wrong, and we come home early when something doesn't feel right, even if we can't explain why.